He looked like just another street musician, dusty boots, worn-out jacket, and a guitar that had seen too many rainy days. No one knew that beneath the cap and silence was a billionaire in hiding, and he made a vow: the first person who sees me not for what I've lost, but for who I am will inherit everything I have left to give. Then one day, a girl with torn gloves and a single coin changed everything. He sat on a worn wooden stool near the corner of Evervale Plaza, where pigeons gathered by fountains and footsteps echoed across the stone. Around him, the city moved without mercy. Heels tapping, cars honking, people chasing minutes like they were oxygen. But he didn't move. Not really. His fingers danced across the strings of a battered guitar, and though his hands were calloused and his coat frayed, there was an elegance in the way he played. A haunting rhythm. A quiet ache. Most people never looked twice. To the world, he was just another forgotten face in a forgotten corner of a crowded city. Just a street musician strumming old songs no one remembered. His voice was rough, his chords soft, and his presence invisible. But what no one knew was that beneath that cap pulled low and the tattered boots tracking dirt into the sidewalk sat Ethan Marlowe, once hailed as one of the most powerful men in the country. The elusive billionaire who vanished without a trace. He used to walk across stages with cameras flashing, his name spoken in every financial headline, every tech expo, every list of top 10 visionaries under 40. He used to wear tailored suits and sign deals that moved markets. But that version of Ethan, the Ethan the world knew, was gone. What remained now was this: a man reduced by betrayal, reshaped by grief, and rebuilt in silence. 1 year earlier, he had everything. A billion-dollar company he had built from his college dorm, an engagement to a woman he thought he'd grow old with, and a board of investors who called him a genius. Until they didn't, single quotes T. It started with a whisper, a rumor of misused funds, then an emergency meeting, then lawyers, then silence. He had trusted the wrong people. People he thought were friends, partners. But they had waited until he was vulnerable when his fiancée's father was dying, when he had stepped back briefly to care for her, and they moved in. His board ousted him with votes masked as concern. The woman he loved, she disappeared without warning. Left nothing behind but a handwritten note: "I can't stand in the crossfire. I'm sorry." He never heard from her again. So Ethan walked away. From the company, the headlines, the press. He left the glass towers behind and went where no one would find him. Into the noise of the world, disguised as a man with nothing left. But he wasn't hiding for pity. He was searching for something real. For someone real. Someone who would look at him not for what he had, but for who he was. And so he made a vow. A strange, silent vow. The next person who drops a coin, not because I look poor, but because they hear something in the music, that's who I'll reveal myself to. That's who deserves to know the truth. It was foolish, maybe. A romantic's desperation. But Ethan had learned that wealth meant nothing if you couldn't trust the hands that reached for it. He had spent a year playing on street corners, in plazas, under archways, and by train stations. His guitar told stories he couldn't speak aloud. Each melody was a memory, every lyric a wound. Some people stopped. Some smiled. A few dropped coins. But Ethan watched each one closely, not with suspicion, but with longing. He wanted to see someone look at him, not through him. Someone who saw not the cap or the case or the creased jacket, but the man still bleeding under the notes. But day after day, no one stayed. They heard the music, maybe even liked it. But they moved on. Life always moved on. And Ethan began to wonder if anyone in this city truly saw anyone at all. Until one afternoon in late autumn, as the wind whipped through Evervale's rust-colored trees and the sky dimmed early, she appeared. She stood on the edge of the plaza like a shadow that wasn't supposed to be there, still, quiet, and watching. Ethan didn't notice her at first. His head was bowed low as he strummed, the tip of his boot tapping lightly against the concrete. But something shifted in the air. A stillness. The kind of silence that walks in just before something important happens. And when he finally looked up, he saw her. She couldn't have been older than 20, maybe younger. Her coat was 2 sizes too big, hanging on her like a memory borrowed from someone else. Her gloves were torn at the fingers. Her shoes looked soaked from rain. But her eyes didn't match the rest. They were sharp, awake, like she was listening to more than just the music. She wasn't scrolling on her phone. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't passing through Dot. She was listening. Ethan's fingers slowed on the guitar. Not because he meant to stop playing, but because something in her gaze made him feel seen, and he hadn't felt seen in so long. Dot, after a moment, she stepped forward. She didn't say anything. She knelt beside the battered guitar case and reached into her pocket. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled out a single coin. It was small, no more than $1, but she placed it down with care, not tossed, not dropped, set. Dot, and then, without warning, she spoke. "Your music. It sounds like someone who lost something." Ethan froze. Most people said things like, "Beautiful playing," or "Do you take song requests?" or "You should go on TikTok." But not her. She didn't speak to the music, she spoke to the pain inside it. He didn't answer at first. He didn't know how. She stood up slowly. "I'm sorry. That was weird. I heard you from across the street, and I don't know, something about it felt familiar." He cleared his throat, voice rough. "No, it's not weird. It's honest." She smiled softly, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something inside him stir. Something like warmth, like connection. Then she turned to walk away, but before she disappeared into the wind, she said something over her shoulder. "I hope whoever you lost finds their way back to you." And then she was gone. Ethan sat there, guitar still in his lap, heart still thudding. He stared at the coin she had placed gently into the case. One coin, one moment, one sentence. And for the first time in almost a year, he didn't feel invisible. That night, Ethan didn't return to the shelter where he usually slept. Instead, he walked for hours, guitar strapped to his back, her words echoing in his ears. "It sounds like someone who lost something." She was right. He hadn't just lost a company. He hadn't just lost a woman. He had lost himself. Somewhere. In the suits, the stock prices, the meetings and betrayals, he had become hollow. And it took a girl with torn gloves and a trembling hand to remind him that he was still capable of being heard. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she went. But he knew one thing. She was the one. The vow he made, it wasn't about the size of the coin, or the sound it made, or even the kindness in the gesture. It was about recognition. About someone hearing him through the silence, and she had, which meant now he had to find her again, not to reward her, not to impress her, but to thank her for pulling him back to life. The next morning, Ethan returned to the same corner of Evervale Plaza, just as the sun spilled gold over the pavement. But the girl with the torn gloves was nowhere to be seen. Waited all day, played the same song she heard, again and again. People passed. Some dropped coins. A few nodded in appreciation, but not her. None of them were her. He went back the next day, and the next. Each time with a strange ache inside him, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He knew it made no sense. She could have been anyone, a passerby, a ghost of the city, someone just drifting through the world like he was. But she wasn't just someone. She was the first person in a year who looked past the scruff on his face, the wear on his clothes, and heard something real in his music. He had no name, no clue, nothing but a glimpse of a red scarf and eyes that seemed far older than the rest of her. So he started asking around. At coffee carts and bookstore steps, at subway stations and soup kitchens. Have you seen a girl about 20, red scarf, torn gloves, curly dark hair? Most people shook their heads. Some ignored him, until a kind-eyed barista from the corner cafe nodded. She comes by sometimes. Never orders much. Sits in the back with a sketchbook. Think her name's Lila, or maybe Lily, something like that. Do you know where she lives? Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. The barista shook her head. No, but I think she volunteers. At the shelter down on Morrow Street, the women's one. Try asking there. It was a start. That night, Ethan walked the 8 blocks to Morrow Street, passing neon signs, cracked sidewalks, and corners of the city he once flew over in private. Helicopters but never really saw. The shelter was quiet, tucked between 2 dark storefronts. Warm light spilled from its windows. He approached the front desk and asked quietly, "I'm looking for a girl named Lila, or Lily. She might volunteer here." The woman at the desk glanced up, studying him. "You a friend?" she asked cautiously. Ethan nodded slowly. "Something like that." The woman seemed to hesitate, then softened. "Her name's Lila Jameson. She comes in Mondays and Thursdays. She doesn't say much, but the kids love her." "A name, finally. Do you know where she lives?" he asked again. The woman shook her head. "No one really does. We think she sleeps at the artist co-op sometimes. Or the shelter, sometimes not at all." Ethan blinked. "You mean she's homeless?" The woman gave a sad smile. "Technically, yes, but she won't say it. She says she's just between places. You'd never guess from how she carries herself, though. That girl has more heart than most people with mansions." Ethan felt something twist inside him. Guilt, wonder, grief. She had seen through his disguise, but he hadn't seen through hers. She had nothing. Yet she gave. She had no home. Yet she brought comfort to strangers that she had no reason to stop for him. Yet she had. He returned every Monday and Thursday, played the same corner, same songs. Waiting. It took 2 weeks. And then one gray afternoon, she came. Same coat, same gloves, but no scarf this time. She saw him and smiled. "I was hoping you'd still be here," she said. He stood quickly, his voice unsure. "I've been waiting for you." She tilted her head, surprised. "For me?" Ethan took a shaky breath. "You said something that day. You said my music sounded like someone who lost something. And I haven't been able to forget it since." Her smile faltered, just slightly. "Most people forget me the moment I leave." "I didn't," he said. She tucked a loose curl behind her ear. "I'm not sure why that means so much, but it does." They sat on the plaza bench together that evening, as the wind picked up and leaves scattered like whispers. They didn't speak much, just listened. And slowly, Ethan began to open up, not fully, not yet but enough. He told her his name was Eli, just Eli. He said he used to be someone else, but he was trying to find that person again. He said he lost a lot. Trust, family, direction. She listened the same way she had before, with stillness, not sympathy. And when he finished, she said softly, "Sometimes you have to disappear, just to figure out who still sees you." And in that moment, Ethan knew she was the one he made the vow for, not because she pitied him, not because she saved him, but because she recognized him even when he was hiding. And now, he had to decide if she was ready to know the truth. Ethan didn't sleep that night, not because he was cold or restless, but because her voice wouldn't leave his mind. Sometimes you have to disappear, just to figure out who still sees you. Lila had said it so simply, but it struck like a chord that resonated through everything he had buried. The betrayal, the shame, the way he stopped recognizing his own reflection in mirrors framed with marble and gold. Now he sat in the old music room of a community center he had once anonymously donated to. He hadn't told her his real name yet. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because it would ruin something sacred. Maybe because he wanted to stay. Ely, the man she had listened to without needing anything from him. But as their conversations grew longer, and her visits became regular, something in both of them began to shift. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was more fragile than that. More essential. Like two people leaning against the same invisible wall, unsure of what they were protecting themselves from, but doing it together. One evening, after playing a private song he never played for strangers, he looked at her and asked quietly, "Would you come with me tomorrow? There's something I want you to see." She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" He hesitated. "A place I haven't stepped inside for over a year. But I think I want to go back, and I don't want to go alone." She studied him, long and careful, then she nodded. "Okay." The next day, he took her uptown past neighborhoods she never entered, in a black car that seemed too sleek for a man like Ely. She looked at him sideways but didn't ask. They stopped outside a towering glass building. Virion Tower. She stared up at it. "This place looks like a spaceship." He smiled weakly. "Yeah, it used to feel like one too." They entered through the side. The lobby receptionist glanced up, startled. "Mr. Marlowe?" she whispered, standing abruptly. Lila looked at him, confused. Ethan exhaled. There it was. He turned to her and spoke softly, so only she could hear. "My name isn't Ely. It's Ethan, Ethan Marlowe." She blinked, not in shock, but as though letting his name settle in her bones. "You're that Ethan Marlowe?" she said. "I was. I don't know if I still am." She looked at him, not like the papers had, not like the people who once bowed to his wealth. Like she was trying to figure out if this changed anything between them. Then she said, "I already knew you weren't just a street musician." He raised an eyebrow. "You did? You played like someone who used to be powerful, but broke your own heart." He swallowed hard. Her words cut with kindness. They went upstairs, where he stood in the boardroom once filled with betrayal. The city skyline looked the same, but everything else had changed. This place. "It made me rich," Ethan said, "and it made me blind." Lila walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling windows, then turned. "Why did you bring me here?" "Because I made a vow," he said, his voice cracking, "that if anyone ever gave without wanting something in return, I would give them the only truth I had left." She stepped closer. "You don't owe me anything." "But I want to," he said. "Because you're the first person who didn't try to fix me. You just listened." Silence filled the room. Then she asked the question he feared the most. "Why did you stop being him?" Ethan looked out at the city, hands trembling. "Because everyone around me loved the version of me that gave them something. Money, prestige, safety. But when I lost everything, even temporarily, they vanished. And the woman I loved, she walked away too." Lila's eyes softened. "So you became someone else?" "No," he whispered. "I became myself. And I didn't think anyone would accept that version." Lila was quiet for a long time, then said, "I've lived that too." He turned to her. "My father was a drunk," she said calmly. "My mom was gone before I turned 10. I've moved 17 times in 6 years. Sometimes I sleep in studios or hallways, sometimes on rooftops. But I show up. I volunteer. I try to matter, and no one really knows." Ethan's breath caught. "Why?" "Because disappearing is easier than explaining. Why you were never chosen." And just like that, they saw each other fully for the first time. Not as billionaire or beggar. Not as savior or wanderer. Just as two people who had been buried by their pasts and were finally digging each other out. Asterisk in the days after that visit to Virion Tower, everything between them felt heavier, more real. Ethan no longer wore the disguise of a street musician when he was with her. He didn't need to. Layla had seen the truth, and somehow, instead of running from it, she had stayed. She didn't treat him like a miracle or a fraud. She still called him Ely half the time, like it was the version of him she liked best. Something inside Ethan had shifted. The more he learned about Lila's story, the evictions, the shelters, the sacrifices, the more the fire inside him returned. Not the fire that once built empires, but something deeper, the fire that wanted to protect someone who had never been protected. He began to wonder, what if she didn't have to sleep on rooftops anymore? What if someone saw her value without asking her to earn it? One evening, just before sunset, he asked her to meet him at a modest art supply store tucked between laundromats. It smelled like paper and possibility. Lila walked in cautiously, still wearing the same oversized coat, her gloves patched now but still thin. Ethan stood near the back, beside a shelf filled with paintbrushes and sketchbooks. "I thought you hated shopping," she teased. He smiled. "I do, but not when it's for someone who's never had the chance to own what they actually need." He stepped aside and revealed a table stacked neatly with fresh canvases, high-end markers, paints, brushes, even a tablet with a digital pen. Lila froze. "What is this?" "It's yours," he said gently. "All of it. I spoke to the store owner. You can come in anytime. Anything you need, he'll put it on my account." She stared at him, stunned. "Why would you do this?" "Because you've spent your whole life giving and creating from scraps. Because you saw me when I was nothing. And because you deserve more." She blinked, once, twice, and then her hands clenched. "I can't accept this," she said softly. "Why not?" "Because it feels like charity." "No," he said firmly. "It's not. It's a thank you." She shook her head. "You don't get it. You're used to giving people things, to fixing problems with money. But this makes me feel small." Ethan stepped back, stung by her words. "That's not what I meant to do." "I know," she whispered. "But when you've spent your life learning how to survive without help, kindness can feel like an insult. Like someone's reminding you of everything you never had." He looked down. "I'm sorry," he said. "I just wanted to help." "I know you did," her voice cracked. "And I love that you thought of me. But I need to know I can still stand on my own." Silence passed between them. And then quietly she reached for a single brush, just one. "I'll take this," she said, "not because you gave it to me, but because I want to paint something honest tonight." He nodded, a tear catching in the corner of his eye. "That's all I ever wanted." That night, she painted in the dark of her tiny shared studio, her coat draped over a chair, the single brush in her hand trembling as she worked. She didn't paint him. She painted herself, a version of herself she had never dared imagine standing tall, barefoot on concrete, looking up at a sky filled with light, not begging for rescue, not waiting for fate, just standing. Meanwhile, Ethan sat on his old bench again, guitar in lap. But he wasn't hiding now. He played for the stars, for her, for every version of himself that had been silenced. He realized that true wealth had nothing to do with towers or tech. It lived in the spaces between two people who saw each other clearly and still chose to stay. And though she had rejected his gift, she had accepted him, and that meant everything. It started with a knock, a slow, cautious knock at the entrance of the studio where Lila sometimes slept. She had just finished rinsing the one brush Ethan gave her, placing it carefully back in the chipped ceramic mug by the window. Outside, the city was dim, its lights flickering like uncertain stars. She opened the door, expecting a neighbor knock, but instead, she froze. Standing there, swaying slightly with a half smile and whiskey on his breath, was the ghost she had spent years outrunning, Lila. The man said, "My girl." Her father. No one had seen him in years. Not since he sold the last of her mother's belongings, took what little money they had, and vanished into backroom bars and borrowed fists. But now he stood before her, wearing a jacket that wasn't his and eyes that looked pasture-like. She was still 10 years old. She didn't speak. "Couldn't. I heard you was still around here," he slurred. Figured maybe you got a place now, some money, a job maybe. She stood tall, her fingers curling into fists. I don't have anything for you. Oh, come on, he said, trying to laugh. That's no way to greet your old man. You stopped being my father the day you walked out. His smile faded. Watch that tone. I'm still your blood. Leela's voice shook, but not with fear. Blood doesn't mean anything if it leaves you bleeding. For a moment, he just stared at her. And then without another word, he turned and left, disappearing into the hallway like a bad dream you try to forget, but never quite do. She closed the door quietly and collapsed to the floor. Ethan found her the next day sitting on the studio steps, arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't say anything when she saw him, just leaned her head gently against his shoulder. I was fine before he came back, she whispered. And now everything feels cracked again. Ethan's jaw tightened. Who? She looked at him, eyes hollow. My father, he found me. Ethan said nothing at first, he just listened. The way she had listened to him. He used to hurt my mom, she continued. And when she left, he started hurting me. But always in ways no one could see. He made me believe I was small, that I was a burden, that I didn't deserve a voice. She looked up at him, trembling. So I disappeared, I faded, I survived. Ethan swallowed hard. He's not allowed to touch you again. Or come near. You, what are you going to do? She asked softly. Throw money at him? The words weren't cruel, just tired. No, he said. I'm going to stand beside you until you don't need to fight alone anymore. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I don't know how to let someone fight for me. He reached into his coat and pulled out something he had kept hidden until now. A small envelope. She took it carefully, eyes narrowing. Inside was a photograph. A younger Ethan, standing with his mother, her smile radiant, her hand over his chest. On the back, his mother's handwriting. You are not what the world takes from you. You are what you choose to give anyway. I lost her when I was 16, Ethan said quietly. And I still hear her voice when I'm about to run away. Lila stared at the photo, then back at him. I'm tired of running. He took her hand gently. Then let's stand still, together. Later that week, with the help of his legal team, whom he hadn't spoken to in over a year, Ethan quietly filed a restraining order against Lila's father. It wasn't revenge. It was safety. But Ethan didn't tell Leela the full extent of what he had done. He didn't tell her about the private investigator, or the quiet donation to the shelter she once slept in, or the job offer he arranged for her under a different name, one she could accept without ever knowing it came from him. Because love, he realized, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's invisible. The invitation came in a brown envelope with no return address. Inside, Lila found a small card text embossed in silver ink. Emerging Artist Showcase, Friday, 6 p.m. You are cordially invited to feature your work at Gallery 18. She stared at it, confused. She hadn't submitted anything. She didn't know anyone from the art world. She hadn't even shown her sketches to anyone besides the shelter kids. At first, she thought it was a mistake. But tucked into the envelope was a note written in familiar, careful handwriting. This is not a gift. It's a mirror. What the world sees in your work is what I saw in you the moment you dropped a coin. Her hands trembled. Ethan thought he had done this quietly. Like always, she showed up at the gallery that Friday wearing the red scarf she'd once lost and then found. Again folded carefully in the pocket of her coat left. There without a word. The room was filled with soft light and long shadows. People murmured around wine glasses, eyes drifting over canvases. And there, on the farthest wall, hung 5 of her paintings, framed beautifully. Beneath each, her name. She couldn't move at first, could only stare, because the faces she had painted, the ones she had thought would never matter, were being seen, studied, admired. People weren't walking past. They were stopping. Behind her, she heard a voice. "You still think you don't deserve to be seen?" She turned. Ethan stood there, no cap, no guitar, no shadows, just him, the man she had come to know piece by piece, now standing fully in his truth. "I didn't want to be your savior," he said. "I just wanted to be someone who believed in you the way you believed in me." She didn't respond. Her eyes shimmered with tears. "You changed me, Leela. You brought me back to life. And not with pity or praise, but with silence, with honesty, with presence." Layla looked at him, at the man who once sat invisible in a plaza, and saw him now as he truly was. Not a billionaire, not a street musician, but a soul stripped bare, unafraid to be seen. "I was never trying to save you either," she said, voice breaking. "I just knew what it felt like to be unheard." They stood there, surrounded by colors and canvases, the noise of the gallery fading into something distant. And then she asked quietly, "What do we do now?" Ethan smiled gently. "Whatever we want." This time without hiding. Weeks passed. Lila's work began selling. Not because Ethan paid people, not because he called in favors, but because her art spoke. It carried something raw, something earned. A truth no gallery light could polish. She still volunteered, still wore the red scarf on cold days, still painted, late into the night. But now, she had a home, not just a roof. A place. Ethan, meanwhile, still played music, sometimes by choice, not survival. And once a week, he returned to Evervale Plaza, sat on the same stool, and played the same song. But now, beside the case, there sat 2 coins, one from her, and one from him, because he had learned something too. Love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through broken strings and borrowed brushes. Sometimes it sits quietly beside your pain. And sometimes it begins with a single coin and a voice brave enough to say, "I see you."